Come back to our channel. This is the tale of Diane Keaton and Al Pacino's love, two movie icons forever linked to The Godfather, whose souls could never truly unite at one moment. Diane Keaton, a strong-willed, clever, and courageous muse, proposed to Al Pacino because she loved him so much. Even Pacino, the man with the unpredictable heart and the dreamy gaze, turned away and left silently. There was a time when they lived side by side, made unspoken promises, and wept for one another. However, in the end, they all went in separate directions. There was no marriage, no finality, just an odd friendship that has lasted, a love that was never named, a split that was never completely final. All of this should be familiar to anybody who has ever loved Diane Keaton, the embodiment of intelligence and independence. To what extent was Diane Keaton wounded? And why was Al Pacino, who had previously declared, "I love you forever," unable to commit to her? Diane Keaton and Al Pacino's unfinished story begins long before they ever met, and that's why it's important to know this. To the formative years of infancy and artistic pursuits that subtly molded their capacities for love and release, Diane Keaton came from a strict Catholic home and was born in Los Angeles. Dorothy, her mother, had a desire of being a theater actress but gave it up to be a full-time mother. Her father was a civil engineer. As a child, Diane saw a beautiful woman confined to a kitchen and vowed she would never be one of those people. Diane made her decision to be a free woman at a young age. She was so outspoken, confident, and unique that she scared off a lot of men. However, Diane was also exposed by the wounded shadow her mother cast. Not the kind of love that flits in and out, but the kind that has the courage to remain, was what she sought. A safe haven, a loving companion, and stability within the ever-changing landscape of creative expression. The look in Al Pacino's eyes confirmed her suspicions. On the other hand, Al Pacino had an entirely different account. His impoverished Italian-American family gave birth to him in New York's East Harlem. At the age of 2, he saw his parents divorce. Rose, his mother, brought him up on her own as she worked 2 jobs in a small apartment in the Bronx. Family was never Pacino's role model. On the contrary, he initially felt at home in the bustle of city streets, in abandoned theaters and movie houses, and in smaller venues. Even though his passion for performing began at a young age, he was only ever ready to devote himself fully to it. To support himself as an actor, Pacino did everything from sleeping in parks to delivering newspapers and working as a cinema usher after being dismissed from school. Just getting by in that world hardened him. Though mild-mannered, he was unapproachable. Profound, but far away. Above everything else, he was terrified of getting attached. Because, in Pacino's view, being attached meant giving up one's independence. Also, he couldn't have survived without freedom. One wants to hang on, while the other knows how to run. They are both in love, but they are also both alone and unable to love each other safely. It wasn't simply a case of 2 teenage actors landing roles in a masterpiece when they crossed paths in 1971 on the set of The Godfather. Unexpectedly, 2 spirits who had grown distant from the concept of redemption recognized each other at first sight. Sometimes, though, fate offers people hope, and then it breaks them. During our conversation, he brought up the fact that they were planning to terminate Pacino. He has some insecurity issues, and they couldn't help but hate him. On the set of The Godfather in 1971, Diane Keaton and Al Pacino first crossed paths. They were both relatively unknown at the time. Although Pacino was a newcomer to the big screen, Keaton was a successful independent comedian. Something subtly started as their gazes connected in the tense setting of an old mafia flick. There was an unspoken bond between them, one that was powerful yet delicate, as if destiny had begun penning their own storyline outside of the frame of the camera. Throughout her career, Diane Keaton has made the confession. She was instantly smitten by Pacino. Based on what she said, she was completely smitten with him. He possessed an endearing and funny personality. On top of being strangely gorgeous, he talked incessantly that I found myself captivated by his eccentric personality, which resembled that of a wandering child or a genius gone wild. In contrast, Pacino remained silent. While he was seeing Keaton, he never came out and said anything about it. Anyone who gets a glimpse of the making of or hears friends' anecdotes can sense it, though. There was an indescribable vibe between them. something more than just a professional concord or physical attraction. Their love started out silently, but it blossomed subtly as they progressed through Part 2 and Part 3 of The Godfather. They dated back and forth throughout the 1970s, seemingly unable to let go of each other. It was during this period that Diane Keaton started to make sense. Rather than a simple teenage crush, her feelings for Pacino were more akin to a mild obsession, and she was prepared to wait more than 20 years for a response. Perhaps that response, though, never materialized. Even worse, Pacino was aware of how harsh it was. However, he stayed the same: deep, captivating, aloof, and uncommitted. That was the turning point, more than anything else. From then on, Diane was the one who led the constant pursuit. There had never been a Hollywood romance quite like Diane Keaton and Al Pacino's. The public was not immediately notified. There were no official engagement announcements or heartfelt red carpet images. But it went on for nearly 20 years in a jumbled, unplanned fashion, like a song without a bridge, building and building until it faded and began again. Their initial cooperation on The Godfather was the beginning of their secret relationship. Keaton dated other people when they weren't together. She dated Mel Gibson, Warren Beatty, and Woody Allen before moving in with him. The name Pacino, nevertheless, would remain etched in her memory forever. All three of the Godfathers, she stated once, cared about one thing: Al. Just like that, it was done. The evasion of commitment by Al Pacino persisted, nonetheless. Even with Diane, his connections were never whole. They did this several times, each time thinking this would be their final breakup before getting back together. The industry often remarked that Keaton was the only one who could stay, who could calm Pacino when he was anxious, who could know better than to put pressure on him, and who could love him enough to wait for something she knew would never arrive. It all changed in the late 80s, while they were filming Part 3 of The Godfather in Rome. Everyone in the villa thought Pacino would finally pop the question to Keaton after all these years of dating. Unfortunately, things turned out differently. Either marry her or end their relationship, Diane told him. She was not selected by Al Pacino. Instead of a thrilling battle, the story ended in a chilling stillness. While Diane was depressed and in treatment after learning her father had a brain tumor, Pacino absent-mindedly left the room, never to return. She kept asking him questions when questioned about that moment. I desired more that I hoped he could love me just as much as he loved him. The tragedy was that sometimes all it takes to drive someone away is a little too much affection. Diane Keaton and Al Pacino's love story is like a solo in a musical composition. One performs the song nonstop while the other gracefully exits the stage. Because throughout the most intimate moments of this relationship, it was Keaton who took the lead in moving forward, having hope, and being prepared. Despite his gratitude and emotion, Pacino chose to remain still as he observed love elude him. Pacino was reportedly characterized by Diane as a smart, yet troubled soul. A brilliant, charismatic, contradictory, and aloof man who never allowed anyone near him. She used adjectives like beautiful, a genius fool, and the most beautiful face I've ever known to describe him. For a heart that was never truly prepared to be tied, though, those words fell flat. Pacino remained single. He didn't believe in a happy ending that could keep him from leaving, not because he didn't love. Diane later acknowledged in an interview that she had a knack for choosing the wrong men. Both of our needs were met. And that's definitely not the recipe for a long-term partnership. Realizing she lacked the requisite stability and caring instinct, she knew she couldn't be a good life partner. What she failed to realize, though, was that the most profound wounds were caused by her too loving. As for Pacino, no one ever wed him. Very lovely. The thought that tying the knot would destroy something lovely tore at him. Maybe he also realized he couldn't love someone ordinarily or with the intensity necessary to commit. Diane Keaton was unable to commit to her lover during their 20-year romance, and Al Pacino was similarly unsuccessful in establishing a lasting connection with a woman. Despite their differences, they were both defeated. When a love affair ended in rejection, the survivor took everything with her. That scar was a part of Diane's acting. Quietly lonely women who were strong-willed, humorous, and unrestrained. It was Al Pacino who brought that void to massive stages. And here he is, in his 90s, still without a genuine home. There was no third party, scandal, or divorce papers involved in the termination of Diane Keaton and Al Pacino's love story. Just one of them pulling back because they're afraid to commit, and the other one deciding to just let go. But once the stage lights went down and the ovation died down, the true question was, who had the most fulfilling life in the end? Diane Keaton's final separation with Pacino was the last time she dated in public. She is now in her 50s and has been childless for 35 years, during which time she adopted a girl and a boy. She came clean in an interview about how nobody had ever asked her to marry them. Perhaps they have come to the realization that I am not the most amiable guy. Still, it was she who firmly said, "I'm really glad I didn't get married." In my opinion, that was the wrong choice for me. Diane Keaton became one of the most successful women in Hollywood even though she was never married. She became a symbol of sophisticated beauty, incisive intellect, and distinctive personality. She won Golden Globes and Oscars and was honored by the American Film Institute, AFI. And even though love had wounded her before, she kept her sense of humor and self-confidence. And what about Keaton's ex-proposal, Al Pacino? Similarly, he has never tied the knot. Yet he is the father of 4 children by 3 separate women. The only one of those relationships that lasted more than a few years and resulted in the birth of twins, Anton and Olivia, was the one with Beverly D'Angelo. Like a string of incomplete film scenes, the others went by, starting with Martha Keller and ending with Noor Al-Fala, the mother of his youngest kid, who was born in 2023. "I avoid doors that might lead to pain," Pacino whispered when asked why he never got married. A hauntingly simple sentence. Maybe he was afraid he couldn't make anyone happy, so he kept his distance on his own, Keaton decided. Non-attachment was Pacino's choice. One, though, has ever sobbed in a therapist's office over a love that was never genuine. Stand out in front of thousands of spectators and say, "I love you forever," to the adulation of an entire industry. You're the only one. If anyone emerged victorious, it would be the one who kept their composure. However, the one who loved more suffered the greatest pain. A relationship that goes from passion to heartbreak and then subtly evolves into something anchored in profound respect and lasting connection is unusual in the chaotic and transient world of showbiz. However, it was accomplished by Diane Keaton and Al Pacino. In addition to no longer being romantically involved, they were also no longer friends. To this day, no one else has any idea what happened in that chapter because they were the sole eyewitnesses, if no genuine rift had ever existed between them. Their friendship, oddly enough, persisted. When Diane Keaton was honored with the Lifetime Achievement Award at the 2017 American Film Institute Gala, Al Pacino took the stage. It had been almost 30 years since they'd loved one another, but that night, Pacino's eyes seemed to make the years melt away. Before interviews, he reminisced about Rome and the times he and Keaton had revealed intimate details from behind the scenes, as well as the times Keaton made him laugh. He seemed to stop for breath as his speech came to a close, and then he exclaimed, "I love you forever," to the whole crowd. Perhaps because she had shed enough tears before, Diane Keaton could only grin instead of crying. Their camaraderie is hardly featured in news reports. There are no images of them going out to dinner or strolling the red carpet together. They continue to use the most loving language when discussing each other in interviews, nevertheless. Pacino has the most stunning face that Keaton has ever laid eyes on, according to her. According to Pacino, Keaton is a unique and extraordinary woman who is constantly surprised and vibrant. Maybe friendship is the only thing that can keep us from really losing each other when love isn't enough to keep us together. And they went with that option. Never to injure each other again, never to return, and never to ignore or downplay what has happened. They parted ways, but their hearts remained intertwined. Love faded away. There was never a proper farewell between Diane Keaton and Al Pacino. Not everything about Diane Keaton and Al Pacino's affair is doomed to failure. A larger generational tragedy is reflected in it. In a world where compromise is impossible, 2 extraordinary, self-reliant, and ambitious people attempt to love one another. Inner lives and early emotional scars motivate both Keaton and Pacino as artists. Keaton inherited her mother's will to succeed and her own sense of identity from an ambitious lady who was never given the chance to shine. This drive persisted throughout her life. Despite her desire for profound love, she drew the line at mediocrity and the prospect of control. However, Pacino was the complete antithesis of it. He was orphaned at an early age, brought up in poverty in the Bronx, and then wandered the streets of New York City in search of acting jobs. He saw love as an eternal danger to his independence, an excessive price to pay for a steadiness he didn't understand. While Pacino yearned for isolation, Keaton yearned for a home in this relationship. I loved Pacino not for who he was, but for what he represented, a lost soul that needed saving. Keaton confessed at one point. Despite his admiration for Diane, Pacino never indicated a willingness to change or considered the sacrifice of a part of himself to be worth it for love. Their shared interest in art, together with their respective fixations on roles, jobs, and creative freedom, served to both unite and divide them. They each proceeded down their own individual routes. Diane became a role model for strong, self-reliant women because she proved that a woman can thrive without a man. Pacino became increasingly reclusive and self-assured, eventually becoming a man who belonged solely on screen. That a great love does not necessarily go hand in hand with a brilliant job, that some people are born to love each other profoundly but never destined to live together. Maybe it was a fate that both of them had long understood. In a way that few people are willing to admit, Diane Keaton and Al Pacino loved each other through years of waiting, secret loneliness, difficult choices, and honesty. They accomplished nothing, though. A lingering remark, "I love you forever," replaced the joyous ending and the wedding captured by the camera. But was it a real, profound love, or merely a dream that Pacino watched from the sidelines when Diane Keaton entered? Would it be love or a mistake to propose to someone and then have them silently walk away? Was it genuine or merely remorse if, even after all these years, that person still talks about you with teary eyes? Their relationship ended. They remain inseparable, nevertheless. Diane Keaton has been unmarried for over half her life, yet no one has ever been able to make her talk as much as Al Pacino does in interviews. And no one has ever been able to replace Diane Keaton in Al Pacino's heart. Titles aren't necessary for all loves, and marriages aren't necessary for all ends. On the other hand, certain sufferings go unrecognized since they may never have started or finished. So, what's your take on it? Maybe Diane Keaton fell for the wrong guy at the wrong moment, but maybe she loved the wrong man all along. Would you be able to wait just one more time if you were a character in that story? Feel free to share your opinions in the space provided. Perhaps love endures even after a person departs. It starts when we muster the strength to keep moving forward, even while our hearts are open. To ensure you don't miss any of our upcoming heartfelt stories, please subscribe to our channel.